Let's have our Justice Thursday conversation now. Today, we want to talk about trauma-informed care for SGBV survivors. We're joined by the Honorable Catherine Mburu. She's a Principal Magistrate and Deputy Registrar in the Office of the Registrar Magistrates Court, and the Honorable Hellen Onkwani. She's a Senior Principal Magistrate at the Makadara Law Courts, and she's also the Secretary of the International Association of Women Judges, Kenya chapter. Yeah, Senior. Your honors. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Good to have you again, Honorable Mburu. I wasn't here the last time you were here.
Yeah.
But good to see you.
I was well received by Ndu and City.
Yes.
Indeed.
Ilikuonea kwa mtandao.
Kwa mtandao. Sasa nakuona.
Very good. Karibuni sana. City, why don't you welcome waheshimiwa Magistrate hapa.
Yes.
Now the day is proverb.
Yes.
The proverbs this week are from?
The Republic of Zambia.
All right.
You have to look after wealth. However, that is my addition. That wasn't in the proverb. But knowledge looks after you.
You have to look after wealth.
But knowledge looks
But
after
knowledge looks after you.
Oh, wow.
Who goes first?
How come I haven't had this week? I listen to this show every morning.
Well, it's a new proverb for every day.
This is a new one.
Yes.
You have to look after wealth.
You have to look after wealth, yes. But knowledge looks after you.
Knowledge looks after you.
Yes.
So knowledge takes care of you.
Yes.
Yes. You are the one to take care of your wealth.
Yes.
And you have to look for it.
Yes.
So, I don't know. That's what I think.
I don't know. You're on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those situations where you can't be wrong, because we're asking your interpretation.
My interpretation.
It is your interpretation, not what you think CT wants you to say. Your interpretation.
You look after? Please repeat again.
You have to look after wealth, but knowledge looks after you.
So you have to take care of what you have. I know this week we are discussing about the bill, the wage bill and all that, and how people cannot be able to survive in this country.
Yes.
How are we looking after the resources that we already have? How are we taking care of them? And I know you have been having the discussion about reducing it, and actually there was no reduction at all. Definitely it was by, I think, 0.2 billion or something like that. So the big question will be, how are we taking care of the resources that we have? And I've had the discussions that are being here that, you know what, it is us to make the money. The Kenya shillings is it's Kenyan money. So we can't have the dollar when we are borrowing the money from everywhere and come here and say, look here, we have gotten donations and being supported from all over. It is actually a debt that our great-grandchildren will have to pay. So it is for us to look after what we already have. And if we don't look after it, then it is going to go into waste, and we will continue accumulating more debts. That's my thinking.
Onkwani.
What happens? Very good.
Hey. Honorable Mburu, what's yours?
You know, in our circles, when your senior speaks,
Kuisha.
wewe. But in the context of what we are going to discuss today, and I will give it by an example. I may have all the wealth, and a child has been defiled, a neighbor, for example, and the first thing I would want to do is take this child to hospital straight away. But there is some knowledge and information I should have, that the first point of contact should be reporting to the police station. That is the knowledge I may not have. I may have the wealth, the money to take this child to hospital, but the wealth and the knowledge of making sure that the first, reporting contact, I go to the police station, I report this incident, then the police station, the investigating officer or the person I find at the OB or the gender desk directs me by giving me a P3, which should be filled and taken to hospital, and then this child is, taken care of in terms of treatment and all that. So I may not have that knowledge, but I have the wealth to take this child to hospital. That's how I would look at it.
And to add to that, I think then from what she has said is that knowledge will take care of you.
Yes.
In the sense that if you had the knowledge that this is what you need to do, then you will be in a safe space.
Knowing the procedure, knowing how you do things.
You've contextualized the proverb beautifully.
Very well.
The way Ndu is looking, it's like we zero work, but it's okay.
I'm at a loss because I'm wondering, my goodness.
It's been contextualized.
When you've read
beautifully.
all these books, then you're able to articulate it,
Yes.
your knowledge
Yes,
so
yes.
well. I'm the one who's in awe, both of you.
Girl power.
Honorable Onkwani.
Yes.
In your court at the Makadara law courts, I would assume, no, I know because we've seen it in the news, that the court deals with several cases of SGBV. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's just start from the basic definitions. What is sexual and gender-based violence?
Sexual and gender-based violence is any offense or an act that is done to a human being that is inhumane. I don't know how to describe it, but sexual and gender-based violence is offenses of defilement, rape, incest, including even assaults, where it is involving family, and which end up into manslaughter and murder cases. So that is what you can define as a sexual and gender-based violence. The gender is involved here. It has a sexual aspect of it. Yes, and there are many cases.
So does it become gender-based if the assault is done, the perpetrator is the opposite gender of the victim?
Yes.
So when it's people of the same gender, we do not consider that gender-based violence.
If they are of the same gender,
If the perpetrator and the victim are of the same gender, can we consider?
It is.
Are there instances where we can consider it as gender-based
yes,
violence?
it is. For example, we have cases where the young boys have been sodomized, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even grown-ups who have been sodomized. It's a sexual and gender-based. The gender, despite whichever gender that you are, whether it's female or male, it has a sexual aspect of it, a violation of your sexual rights. Yes.
Okay, so it's really broad based what we're discussing here.
Yes.
Because of course, I mean, there's this one famous case of a woman, unfortunately, who had been attacked, and the leader of the gang that essentially raped her was a woman, and she was giving the order for certain things to be done. So across the board, we see that it does then range from who does what to whom. Now, in Kenya, and the things that we have seen over time, protecting those who are victims, have we seen over time that the protection guardrails have been improved upon, especially when it comes to reporting of these cases? Unfortunately, there was a time where many of them would have been swept under the carpet or hushed because it's still a thing of taboo to talk about sexual things. What's the state of things today in terms of how we see these being handled at a justice level?
Want to go first?
Yes. Now, going back to what I had said earlier, if a child is molested, for example, and in this case, allow me deliberately to use a child because of the special, unique nature that our children face in our country. This child has to narrate this story depending on where the offense took place. Assuming it took place in a school or in a school setup, because it happens. Sometimes we get teachers who are involved. And so the first person she or he may narrate the story to would be a teacher, and maybe a class teacher, for example, or the head teacher or principal, whichever name we want to use. If it is at a home setup, the first person he or she may narrate the story to would be probably a parent or a guardian or someone who she's close to at the home environment. Now, when that happens, and then now when the justice system kicks in, you'd want to refer this case to a police station, for example. That police station must have an environment, or should have an environment, where this child should be able to narrate his or her story. The first contact point being what we call a gender desk. Now, it is expected that all police stations must have a gender desk. So that now, when this child or this person who has been molested or sexually assaulted has a forum to explain what exactly happened in an environment that, there are times when they are told, where were you walking at night? Where were you walking at this time? Why were you wearing like this, like this? So somebody who will not judge this victim, a gender desk. And then now, if we are going to go to a hospital, for example, we have a special unit set aside to deal with those cases. So that now, if a child is referred to this hospital X, for example, then they are directly directed to where they are supposed to go, so that they are not mixed with everybody else because of the unique nature of handling these cases. And then now, once that is done, I'm just giving a broad example of the whole chain. Then once that is done, then goes back to the police station, so that now we start investigating. An IO, an investigating officer, is allocated that case. So investigation process starts through. And then now, eventually, when they come to us, there has to be an environment, both physical, mental, psychological, where this case should be handled, infrastructure-wise and everything else. So I would say we have improved, but we are not yet there.
Okay.
Infrastructure-wise, we've come up with building structures, etc., making sure that we have a room whereby we're handling these victims, but not all courts have such infrastructure. Remember, we started building courts a long time ago in the 60s, 70s. So somehow we have to readjust them. And even building new ones, because we partner with so many partners, national government, county governments, building new ones so that now they're able to accommodate this kind of an environment. At the same time, the officers handling these matters, Honorable Onkwani and I, for example, are well trained to ensure that you put yourself in the shoes of this victim, empathy, so that they're not re-traumatized. If I may not speak on behalf of ODPP, but what I know ODPP, what they have done is they have launched a child-friendly victim room. So if you look at this room, for example, someone seated out there should not see you inside. But us who are inside here should be able to see.
Outside.
No, it's the other way around, sorry. The other way around, yes. So that now when this child is narrating the story, it is recorded. So I'm assuming by the time we leave here, there's a recording, for example. And so re-victimization is reduced in terms of giving this story from the guardian to the police station, to the hospital, back to the investigating officer. Maybe the probation officer is involved to prepare a report. Then finally come to court, narrate the story all through. When we have this recording played in court, the child is cross-examined, and we are done.
Okay. So there is an element of protectionism that is then happening. I imagine that stories of sodomy for young boys who have to go through this horrible turmoil of, first of all, shedding the societal thing whereby you don't talk about something like this, and then having to narrate that again in order for some kind of justice to be done. Do you see that more? I mean, I'm just going to stick on boys because sometimes we forget that they are actually victims of this. Do we see then that more are coming as a result of that protection that has been set up? Is it happening more?
We are not seeing many of the cases of the boys who have been sodomized. And I think it's because of the society that we are in. As a man, you're not supposed to say some of the things. And as a man, there's that shame. But we have cases. And mostly it is when the parents actually now realize that there is something that is happening here. Or there are boys who are bold and can be able to say, this and this happened to me. I think it is something that we need to think around and maybe change our perspective to encourage the boys to be able to be talking more. But what I have realized from the cases when we are proceeding, the parents don't want their children to be examined, especially the swabs being taken. because I have had instances where the parents then will say, look here, the moment then you will be taking the swabs from there, maybe you're also now intruding to the
you're
private
violating.
space. Yeah, yes. So it is not a very good thing. But we have cases actually, and I think where now it is heading towards is for the boys to be violated more. I believe there are many boys out here who have been violated. Because when I speak to people who are in that space, they tell me, if you find the homosexuals, for example, you will find that majority of those people, they were sodomized when they were young. That was their first sexual experience. And now they grew up knowing, look here, this is the way. This is how people live. This is normal. So it becomes a habit, and it goes on like that. You will be shocked right now. There are even now the families, the stories that we are hearing from out here is that the families may be husband and wife, man who you've been married for a long time. They say they want SIM too. Yes. So I don't know what is happening on that one. I can't be able to comment. But maybe to talk more on what Catherine had said about the gender desks. Yes, it's expected that all the police stations are going to have gender desks. And that gender desk, it will just be a desk like this one if you don't have someone who is trained. But what have we done as the IAWJ? We have tried to train the police officers to man those gender desks. But what happens, that police officer whom you have trained and who knows what to do, then they are transferred to another station. And that is why we have been agitating that, look here, can it be made mandatory at the police training school? That, look here, every police officer is trained on how to handle gender-based violence cases. What kind of evidence are you supposed to take? How do you handle this victim the moment they enter there? Do you keep the underwear, for example? What kind of where do you refer them? Because you will find that there are employment of police officers every year, but then there is not that training. The ones who have been training, I think they are just a drop in the ocean. As she talked about the infrastructure, yes, you will have the infrastructure. And I like what City had said about the proverb, that look here, the knowledge, what will it do to you? You will be having the infrastructure, but if you don't have people who are trained and who understands that wherever that I am doing, it is something that is not going to re-traumatize the victim, then what am I doing? We see that in courts, even the questions that are being asked, including our own colleagues, the advocates. And you're wondering, counsel, did you just ask that question? For example, when you're asking a child that when you were defiled, how did you feel? It's offensive. How did you feel? How did you expect them to feel? Jesus. Let's stop now.
Okay, this conversation this morning is our Justice Thursday conversation. Trauma-informed care for SGBV victims. The Honorable Hellen Onkwani is a senior principal magistrate at the Makadara Law Courts. She's also the secretary of the International Association of Women Judges Kenya chapter. The Honorable Catherine Mburu is a principal magistrate and the deputy registrar of the Magistrates Courts. City, you had a question.
My question was this. If I look at the court system, the justice system, let me not call it the court system, and I look at all the issues that land at their doorstep, and then we pinpoint one specific issue, sexual and gender-based violence, something which seems to be on the increase, and one sees that simply by reading our papers on a daily basis. And yet that is also just a small dot compared to what is actually happening. Now, my question was, yes, people are trained. How are they trained? How does this system train all those in this chain to A, understand it, and B, be able to prosecute it in a manner that at the end of that particular process, the person who suffered from this violence actually not only gets justice, but also perceives that they have actually received justice?
Now, in the judiciary, we have the Kenya Judiciary Academy, which trains judges and judicial officers. The prosecution, they have a prosecution training institute. For the National Police Service, they have their own training space. For the entire government, we have the Kenya School of Government, dealing with training of all public servants. But now when we speak about, or when we talk about SGBV, we have realized that we cannot have these segregated types of trainings because we are speaking to one thing. So if I go to Kiganjo, for example, for the police, there is a structured way that they are trained.
Yep.
It may not cover specifically SGBV. And if it does, it's just a small drop in the ocean.
Unit.
It's a unit. And so moving forward, now that we launched or we validated the practice directions, one of the requirements now when we move to the next financial year is to ensure that we train all justice actors. So it's not just training judges, kando, judicial officers, kando, prosecutors, kando. We bring all of them in one room. And then we have a conversation. So if I was to ask a police officer, why don't you have a gender desk at police station X? Then they'll be able to explain infrastructure. Then what can we do to address this kind of infrastructure problem?
Are you saying you have a different curriculum for each of these departments of the judicial system?
Yes, they are different.
Why don't you have a uniform curriculum?
Now that is where we are heading coming financial year, and with the support of partners like UN Women, IDLO, UNDP, so that now when we are addressing SGBV, I'm able to understand from the police, they'll say, I do not have ABCD. So how can we bridge this gap? And then now when we come to court, I'll be able to maybe to explain, my room or my courtroom is not victim friendly. How can we restructure it in such a way that when this victim walks in, they are not traumatized?
Okay. There's certain cultural and societal biases that we grow up with. It doesn't matter what discipline you find yourself in, they are resident in you. When you're talking about gender or sexual and gender-based violence, and then you bring in same-sex conversations, that alone scares many people, irrespective of whether you are in the police, you are in the judiciary, you're just an ordinary civilian. It doesn't really matter. Now, I'm going back to the curriculum again. Do you then understand the need to have people understand and internalize just these, because these are differences. These are not things that people are socialized to actually understand and to put their biases aside. Why do I say this? In many instances, when you talk to people who have just gender-based violence, not even sexual, when they've reported this matter to the police station, they are told, mambo ya nyumbani. That is the, it doesn't really matter. That, as far as they're concerned, nendeni muongee na wazee. Go and talk to elders of your community. And yet, something criminal has taken place. Now, that's societal norms and certain cultural upbringing coming to the fore. Is there a plan to address these issues? Because they will interfere drastically with the process that we are now discussing.
And maybe to delve into that quickly, I think we have the Victim Protection Act. It's a 2014 act, and I don't know whether many Kenyans know about the Victim Protection Act. As a victim, you need to be protected. And that is actually to implement Article 159 of the Constitution. Whether you're male, whether you're female, you're entitled as a victim to be protected, and you're right to be protected. In the sense that whether it is something you grew up knowing this is not right or this is wrong. For example, I attended a training for LGBTQ last year. And trust me, it was an eye-opener.
Training for LGBTQ?
For rights, and yes, rights and their violations and all that.
Okay.
See where your mind was headed.
I get it now. Okay.
So on their rights, on the laws and the protections that people need. Look here. Every human being, by the fact that you are a human being, your rights needs to be protected and your space needs to be protected, isn't it? There are things which are private. How you decide to have your sex, like you're saying how you want to have your bacon, it's up to you. It will be none of my business to come and tell you how you're going to do it if you're an adult and you've consented to whatever that you've consented to, isn't it? Yeah. But if it's something that you did not consent to, then there is a problem. Then you have been violated. So, you asked the question about the trainings and how those perceptions and the growing up can be changed. I think it can only be done through trainings. Look here. Yes, I know you grew up. I grew up in Kisii. Some things don't happen there. So, look here.
Some
yes,
things are not talked about.
some things are not even talked about
Yes,
there.
they don't happen.
You don't talk about it.
Yes.
But here we are. I'm in the judiciary, isn't it? I will meet all these people, isn't it?
Yes,
I
you
need to give them justice.
Yes.
I need to understand. And without having that knowledge on how you can protect their rights, then you're doing zero. The trainings that now we are doing as the Women Judges Association, we are partnering with the UN Women, with the Wangu Kanja Foundation, which deals with the survivors. And we are now bringing all the court users. Who are the court users? You'll find the chair of the court user is the head of station. We have the police, we have the ODPP, we have the chief, we have the community, we have the human rights in the society, we have the advocates, everyone. Like next week, we are going to have a training on SGBV and all those court users, that is the ones within Nairobi and Kajiado County. We try to bring everyone now on board in our small ways and with the partners. And they were talking about the finance bill. There's no money. The judiciary, Madam here works in the big office of the registrar. And most of the time when we are asking for money to do these trainings, there's no money in the budget. You saw what was given to the 3 billion for the judiciary, and we don't have infrastructure. So we have to depend on our partners to be able to help us in their small ways. You will be shocked that we had one of our partners, which was UNFPA, United Nations Population Fund, and we were working with them in Kibera. And you will be shocked that some of the girls who are school-going, they will actually agree to be violated, defiled, because they don't have pads. So they started a program, dignity kits, for the girls. So to help them source for cheap materials so that then they can be able to make those parts that, look here, this is something. So what are we talking about? As much as we're talking about rights, we are talking about that. We are not looking at the bigger picture, empowerment. If you look at the whole chain, the whole issue, it is about empowerment. Okay. You don't have the economic resources. I was speaking to Wangu Kanja yesterday, and she was telling me it's been a heavy week. Look here, they have a case which has not been reported. An 18-month-old child was defiled by the father. The matter was reported to the police. The father has refused. They colluded with whoever. So the matter was reported at the police station. The case, they file imekaliwa. Even your Mekana. File imekaliwa. The matter has not gone to court. The mother wants justice for this child, an 18-month-old. Apparently the father was paid. So it's crazy out here as we talk about it. And the question then I will be asking, yes, the people have gone through the justice chain system and someone has completed their case. What happens after? I am told even the counseling and the psychosocial support, it goes on for around 6 months after that. But does that trauma go away? What mechanisms do we have? How are we going to follow up on this? Is it a way in which the country needs to take it up? And that is why we are having mental health issues and people killing one another and people committing suicide.
For sure, it must be asked. I mean, look, and I think, how do you then deal with some of the silent, unspoken issues? One that's not so silent that came out, it was on Tuesday, so we saw this horrible story of a 4-month-old child who was defiled by an 11-year-old child. How do you deal with something like that, whereby it's a shame, first of all, the mother doesn't know what to do, the parents of the 11-year-old, what do? Do you take it to court? Who do you speak to? How do you go around? But this is one story that has been reported amongst many that people don't speak about. So what kind of justice then are we able to apply to some of these cases? What do you do? Where do you go in such a case? Who reports whom? Can you take that 11-year-old child to court? Do you have them arrested? How do you deal with a 4-month-old child who's not able to swallow properly, talk less of speaking about what happened? 4-year-old baby. What 4-month-old baby rather? In such cases, what do you do? Which is obviously leading to the mental health burden. I mean, it's just so layered. How are we even starting to deal with that from a judicial point of view?
Now, legally, you have a 4-month-old and you have an 11-year-old child. Now, legally, the problem with law is sometimes it can can be convoluted. So legally, these are children, first of all, in need of care and protection. Before we look at the criminal aspect of it, and before we take the criminal justice system, children who are in need of care and protection, and especially the child who is in conflict with the law. That's the term that it's used.
Yeah.
Not a criminal, not an accused person, a child who is in conflict with the law. That is the starting point. And then now we look at how do we address some of this. This is where capacity building comes in and training. Psychosocial support. This 4-month-old may not even understand what is going on.
Cannot swallow properly.
Exactly.
What I mean.
The same thing with this 11-year-old. Hajui ni nini. And maybe they have access to technology where they are seeing these things. You know, the TikToking and all that. So the 11-year-old says, let me experiment. And who do I experiment with? With a
baby.
With a baby. So first of all, they do not understand what this is all about. And this is where now capacity building comes in and training, so that we all understand. And even when we also involve the guardians or the parents, is the criminal justice system the solution to this problem?
It's part of the solution. Because if you were to simply go by the very traumatizing reincarnation of events that we read in the papers every day, you may come to the conclusion that we're actually a traumatized nation.
Yeah.
That in our own little way, we're all traumatized. And the problem with that is, once it's ingrained, your reaction will be to find someone else to traumatize. So our reactions, you see, you look at that chain reaction, then what we see as bad morphs and it's multiplied and becomes worse. Things that you never thought you could read or hear about, you then get to hear. And you have to, when you say mental health issue, you sort of like give a blanket statement that's supposed to describe it, but it's actually worse than that. Why do you find all these things that we find abhorrent on the increase? You see, if I take the discussion back to sexual and gender-based violence, just sex, most people do not, cannot, will not discuss matters of sex.
True.
Even when they are in a relationship or in a marriage, it's not discussed. So if you don't discuss it, and if it's something that is talked about when lights are off and under a blanket, that's of course. How then do you get to actually deal with it? Because a court is an open place. And reporting means you're going to go to that open place. So people are, the reluctance to actually report it goes further into what I loosely refer to as social and cultural norms that we have. But it begins there. And then we come to you, wonderful officers of the court, who have to deal with these things. And since you're citizens of this very same country, and you're brought up with the same cultures, are there units in law school that teach you some of these things?
To deculture you.
Yes, to unculture you, so that when you get to the bench, well, you at least you've been prepared. Because I get the impression that by the time you move up the ranks, you aren't really prepared. Your preparation comes with just experience. You learn as you move on the job. And yet you ought to have been prepared, because this is something that is a reality. Do we even have a situation where when we look at the curriculum of those who are taught in law school, you realize we have this problem in the country. We need to add a unit of this into our curriculum so that those who are now coming out, I don't think that happens. So I'm saying, you look at this situation, we could say your work is cut out for you, but it is far, far worse than that. And everything we're discussing goes beyond the judicial service system. It goes beyond it completely.
There are some of the things that you can't learn. Trust me, I sit in that court, and some of the things you hear, new things and shocking things on a daily basis. You're wondering, where am I? Sometimes you tap yourself, Helen, is this me?
Am I awake?
Is this me? But then you're reminded of your oath of office.
Yes.
And you're right. That look here, I remember my first case, I think, I was employed and I was sent to Karatina. And I got a culture shock where children are abusing their parents. I couldn't imagine. I'm shocked first. I'm like, what did I bring myself into? What is this? It's happening. How do you abuse your parent? And you are in court and you're continuing to abuse your parent. And you're not shocked and you're not wherever. Wow, where I came from, it was a taboo. It was a taboo that you don't do this. So you're right that some of these things we've learned as we go along. And then you're trying to put yourself in this situation that, look here, I am the only hope. Look here, this person has come. And you will be shocked the kind of crying that happens sometimes. And when we are talking about trauma-informed, it's not like as we are not human beings. Sometimes you go to your corner and you ask yourself questions. I have a young girl. When I go home, she had gotten to the habit of asking me, Mommy, so today, what did you do at work? I got to the point I told her, Mommy, please, let's not discuss about work. I don't want to discuss. I talked about, like in our court, we have Wednesdays for SGBV cases. So you are from court, you've had 10 SGBV. There were children who were crying. There are adults here who are crying. Everyone else is crying. Sometimes they leave you there. The prosecutor cannot be able to understand what's happening here. They cry, the prison, everyone, your court assistant. You are left now with someone who is crying. So you have to be the person who is doing the counseling. You can't also cry. And you have to say, calm down. You have to look for strategies. Sometimes you have to give tissues. Sometimes you have to give water. Sometimes you have to take a break, including even yourself. You need to take a break and just breathe in and breathe out and say, look, I have to sit in this seat. I have to work. Of course, I have to work for money as well.
You've got to do what you're here to do. I want to go back to the issue of training. Honorable Mburu, you said, so in the next financial year, you're going to roll out this training. But where you're seeking to bring the people, together and to train them. But these are too many. There was something that you had mentioned earlier about putting it in the curriculum and saying that part of the curriculum in Kiganjo for the National Police Service will be something to do with handling of this kind of gender and sexual-based violence, sexual and gender-based violence. That also has to go into AP training school because you'll find the AP officers as well in the stations. You also have to think about the chiefs. In many cases, the first point of call will be the sub-chief or the chief. You have to think about the lawyers. The Kenya School of Law as well should have a curriculum on this. And you said the Judicial Academy, the Judiciary Academy has this as well. But there are more prisons training school. They have to also go through this. Is there such a plan to actually come up with a unified curriculum, even if it's going to be a unit or something that is trained across all these training institutions for all these actors in this chain?
Yes, there is such a plan. Include doctors in that list.
Doctors as well, yes.
Yes, all those professionals. Yes, the plan is there. That's why we have support from the UN Women, the UNDP, the IDLO, because we can't do it on our own. In terms of finances, we are not able to do that. There is a book called What They Don't Teach You in Harvard. I'm sure City has read it. And so in this case, when you talk about all this, it is what they didn't teach me in law school. It's what they didn't teach you. What did you learn in school?
Many things.
Many things. What they didn't teach you in that one. what they didn't teach you, in your line, the line that you took. So that now when we sit and say, look, there are emerging issues which are coming up. Long time ago, we never thought about counterterrorism offenses. Now these are emerging issues. Cross-border offenses. These are emerging issues.
Sex trafficking,
human trafficking. We can't bury our heads. When you're looking at the actual curriculum of probably, let's say, the Kiganjo School or Kenya School of Law or the universities. Now, if we have to amend it, there is a whole procedure or process of going through about it. So instead of us waiting until that time, why don't we sit as justice actors and chart a way forward, of course, with the support of the different partners that we have? What will be contained in this curriculum? We may be assuming you know what gender-based violence is.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, you may find even nurse professionals, some of us do not really understand what it is all about. So that is where we come in. Yes.
That's going to be a big one, because you also have to address what you said as a challenge. You've trained an officer, the officer has been transferred. So you have to keep training and retraining.
Yes.
You've trained a magistrate, the magistrate has been transferred, or the magistrate has been promoted, or they've now become a judge and they're no longer dealing with these issues at that level. It's a good thing that they're still in the judiciary, but they're not. So how do you address that? Is it going to be continuous training then?
Continuous and targeted to every officer. Of course, it's futuristic. There's somewhere we have to start. It's a dream which has to be realized. So if we say today we are going to train 10 officers, who are these officers?
Yeah.
Where do we start? So that we ensure each and everybody who is involved in the justice system goes through that particular training.
Time flies when you're having an interesting conversation.
Maybe to add
our
to
time
that,
is up.
maybe to add to that before our time is up. Myself and Honorable Kate, we sit at the case types committee that was formed by the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary with the support of the Chief Justice. I know, as you are aware, there was the rollout of the SGBV courts, and there has been issues about those courts. The first one was in Shanzu, and they said, look here, in Kotiangono. So we have, in that committee, we have come up with a report and the case types, and it's going to be called Agenda Justice Court. And it's going to have all the mechanisms, including how do you fall out, including the civil case. If, for example, you are the perpetrator, then you need to compensate the victim.
Honorable Hellen Onkwani, Senior Principal Magistrate of the Makadara Law Court and the Secretary of the International Association of Women Judges Kenya Chapter, Honorable Catherine Mburu, Principal Magistrate and Deputy Registrar in the Magistrates Court. Thank you for joining us. It's been our Justice Thursday conversation.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.